In this lesson we're going to be finding out unit fractions of an amount. So the first thing we're going to have to do is to look back to the very beginning of this unit and remember what a unit fraction is. Now the first thing to remember is a fraction is a part of the whole amount, and I can represent the whole amount as a bar. So this bar represents everything. And of course, if I'm looking at working out a fraction, I've chopped that everything into equal parts, and in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop it into 4 equal parts. Now each of these parts represents a fraction of the whole, and we can see as I've got 4 parts, my denominator is going to be 4 or quarters, and each one of those 4 parts is 1 over 4 or 1 quarter. Now you can see that I've shaded in 2 parts of the bar. I've shaded in part which is orange and part which is blue. Now we can see there's a different amount. In the orange, there's just 1 of those 4 parts, 1 quarter, and in the blue, it's 3 of those 4 parts, or 3 quarters. The 1 quarter is what we call our unit fraction. The 3 quarters is what we'd actually call a non-unit fraction. So in today's session, we're just going to be looking at that idea of that 1 quarter, that unit fraction. Now let's turn to our textbook and look at our first problem to be solved, which relates to our kitchen. And we can see that we have our people here, and they have some ingredients, and they're obviously making toppings for a cake. And for question 1a, we're asked, there are 30 marshmallows in a bowl. How many marshmallows are used on 1 cake? Now looking at the recipe, you can see we have our fractions there. So which one of those is going to be the thing that's going to help us? And when you're trying to work out this question, think carefully about what representation you can use to help find that fraction of amount. Maybe thinking about what we looked at the very beginning using our bar model. For question 1b, we're asked, there are 45 chocolate swirls in a bag. How many chocolate swirls are used on 1 cake? Again, think about that strategy you'll use for question 1a, and think about looking at the recipe to identify what fraction you're going to be looking at off that bag of chocolate swirls. So now you're going to take the opportunity to pause the video, and you're going to go to your books and you're going to answer question 1a. There are 30 marshmallows in a bowl. How many marshmallows are used on 1 cake? Remembering to look at the recipe and identifying the information that you need. And for question 1b, there are 45 chocolate swirls in a bag. How many chocolate swirls are used on 1 cake? So now pause the video, give that one a go, and then come join me so we can have a look at the strategy you used. So welcome back. Let's have a look at our strategy for question 1a. There are 30 marshmallows in a bowl. How many marshmallows are used on 1 cake? So in order to begin answering this question, you can see that I've drawn something on the board straight away. So the question is, why have I put 30 counters on this page? What do those counters represent, do you think? Of course, these 30 counters are representing my 30 marshmallows. And those 30 marshmallows are my total amount, the whole that I have. Now, I'm told by the recipe that I'm looking for 1/3 of my bowl of marshmallows. So I'm looking for 1/3 of 30 marshmallows. And the next stage that I've done is I've taken that bar and I've now separated it into 3 equal parts. So we can see that this is now working with denominators of 3. And each part of that bar is 1 of those 3 parts. So we're working in thirds, with each section being 1/3. And if we can look back at our recipe, we know that I'm going to be using 1/3 of those 30 marshmallows. So I'm going to be using that unit fraction of 1/3. So my next stage is I'm going to have to look at how I'm going to actually share out my 30 marshmallows to find 1/3. And how I'm going to do this is by simply having 3 equal parts. And I'm going to share the 30 marshmallows equally between those 3 parts. So I'm going to share it into 3. So 30 divided by 3 is going to be my number sentence, or alternatively, I could physically take my counters and equally share them out into 3 different groups. And now we can see that I've shared out those 30 counters, which represent my marshmallows, and in each of those groups, in each third, there's going to be 10 counters, which represent 10 marshmallows. So for this question, there's 30 marshmallows in a bowl. How many marshmallows are used on 1 cake? Well, we know that 1/3 of that bowl is going to be used on the cake, so 1/3 of 30, which is going to give me 10 marshmallows. So 10 marshmallows will be used on one cake. And for question 1b, we're asking, there are 45 chocolate swirls in the bag. How many chocolate swirls are used on one cake? And looking at our recipe again, we can see straight away that we're being told that 1/9 of a bag of chocolate swirls are going to be used on one cake. So once again, I've represented my whole, I've represented my chocolate swirls as one bar. So that one bar represents the 45 chocolate swirls that were in the bag. Because I know that I'm looking for 1/9 of the chocolate swirls, I've broken or separated my bar into 9 equal parts. So my 45 is going to be shared into 9 equal groups. And using my known division and multiplication facts, I know that 45 divided by 9 gives me an answer of 5. 9 lots of 5 makes 45. And of course we were looking for a unit fraction, we were looking at 1/9. So I've highlighted one of those 9 sections, 1/9 of those sections in yellow, and you can see that that gives me 5. So 1/9 of 45 is 5. So there are 45 chocolate swirls in the bag. How many chocolate swirls are used on one cake? 5 chocolate swirls will be used on one cake. So let's quickly recap on the strategy we've just looked at. Now this has been to identify and find a unit fraction of an amount. And the first step we had was we were going to use our bar model. So we represented the total amount, no matter how big or how small it is, as a bar. To help us remember how much we're dealing with, we've then labelled that bar with the total amount. So however many you've got of whatever you're looking at. The next stage that we've looked at is dividing the bar into equal parts. So however many parts you want to share that thing into, so for example, we've got our 45 that we've shared equally into 9 parts. You want to separate your bar, so if you're working in quarters, it'll be in 4, fifths, 5, and so on. But make sure you're separating that whole bar, that total amount, into that many equal parts. The next stage is to take your total amount and share it equally into those parts. So in this case, we've shared 45 into 9. So this could be something where you're using counters or you're using your concrete representations and physically sharing out however many you have as a total equally amongst each group. Alternatively, you might use a pictorial model, you might draw a picture whereby you're symbolising each number, maybe using dots or triangles or stars or whatever it is you want to use, but showing them equally amongst that amount of divisions in the bar. And finally, you might be using an abstract model. You might actually be looking at this and going 45 divided by 9 and using one of your known strategies that we've already looked at. And then of course it's the final and probably most important part. You've done all the hard work, you've worked out the answer, but now you need to show the answer. So you're identifying the amount of parts or the fraction that you need. So in this case, I have 9 parts and I've identified one of those 9 parts, or 1/9. So we can see here that 1/9 of 45 is 5. So now what I'd like you to do is move on to your textbook. I want you to apply the strategies we've looked at in the remainder of those questions before you move on to your independent work in your workbook. Good luck, and I look forward to seeing how you get on with this.